Good afternoon. I'm Waldo Johnson, the director of the Center for the Study of Race, Politics, and Culture. And I'm joined by George Chauncey, who is the director of the Center for Gender Studies. And we welcome you to Lunch and Conversation with Bill T. Jones. We're pleased to be a part of this larger Presidential Fellow in the Arts program, which brought Mr. Jones to campus. And so this afternoon, we're happy to have an opportunity to eat a bit, but even more importantly, to kind of chat and talk a little bit about Mr. Jones, his professional career, and what it has meant not only for the arts, but for the world in general. We're also joined by Yvonne Rainer, who is the creative director for the company and Mr. Jones' partner. And so we are anticipating a wonderful conversation that at some point we will even ask you, once you've finished eating, to join in. We're going to begin with George, who actually has the opening questions.
Right, and we'll just sort of go back and forth between questions, just to say it's an honor to have you here. And now that you've taken off your shirt, it's a thrill. But it was already a thrill, actually.
It's a bigger thrill. Yeah. I'll start singing.
Yeah, well, we don't expect you to sing. I want to ask you a sort of provocative question, but also people here won't be surprised. A historically oriented question to begin. Kind of just responding to your provocative remark at the very beginning of your presentation last night, which, how many of you were able to get to the discussion last night? Okay, good. Probably about half the people here, which I thought was just wonderful, both the remarks and then the discussion with Gretchen Helfrich. But you had been introduced as someone who did openly gay choreography, among other things, and then you began by asking, what is openly gay choreography? It's like saying openly black choreography. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to talk to you about openly gay choreography and openly black choreography in the sense, I guess, of choreography that both thematically deals with experiences, gay issues of gay existence, and that somehow has a kind of dance vocabulary that, if not verbally, fairly overtly expresses gay sensibility and the kind of couplings that are allowed, the kind of tenderness allowed between two men or two women, the body language and so forth. Mm-hmm. And likewise, a kind of what we could call openly black choreography, which doesn't just put black bodies on stage, but engages with issues of racism, African American history, and so forth.
Well, George, you're starting in it's a rich introduction, but you're starting in the swamps, and it's a swamp that I've been trying to get through for my career. First of all, there was the old nasty debate: what is black choreography? And this was a really nasty debate if you were, in fact, a person like myself who felt that you were black enough. What is blackness? You got to be poor. You've got to have the lashes on your back, or you have to be able to point to somebody who has the lashes on. I have that. My mother, at age 8, was made to kneel with her brothers and sisters and watch her mother whipped by the man at the farm they worked on in Georgia. I got those bona fides. We were on welfare when I left home at 18. We were in a German Italian community. Why were we there? Because we were potato pickers. Yes, I grew up with kids who were the people that my parents worked for. Yes, we were 5 years old washing our hands, and the little German child said to me, "Oh, I'm surprised. I thought it would come off when you washed." I have the bona fides. But suddenly you find yourself at the State University of New York at Binghamton, and there is a third world corridor. And we're sitting at luncheon like this. Would you please pass it? Why are you so formal? Why you talk like that? Why don't you get real? What do you mean get real? I'm talking where I come from. I come from upstate New York with German, Italian kids. You could count the black people with one hand. The experience that I had in my home was directly from the South. My parents were not northern urban types, potato pickers, right? So I went to work, and then the 60s came along, the 70s. You are what you eat, you are what you do. Liberation. So, if you want to make modern dance, you don't have to take on anybody's burden. Make the dance that you want to make. But the world said, he's black, therefore he's a black choreographer. Wait a minute, I'm a hippie choreographer. You think you're a hippie choreographer, but we know, we see you're black. And that's when the battle started, with black people. Now, here we are, gracious surrounding, and you want me to sign on to being a gay choreographer. Arnie Zane and I met at the State University of New York at Binghamton. Our idols were Gertrude Stein and Alice B. Toklas. We saw ourselves as high modernists. You understand the language? Who were these? Two women who dressed, Gertrude Stein dressed like a man. She and Picasso was her equal. She didn't herself know many female geniuses. She was one. And the boys accepted her as one. We loved them. We loved all of that stuff. And there was a thing called contact improvisation. Contact improvisation, as developed by Steve Paxton, a brilliant, handsome young dancer with Merce Cunningham, took its precedence from Aikido, Linde, karate, jiu-jitsu, all about weight sharing. And it was a liberating technique because anybody in this room can lift anybody else by using the proper leverage and what have you. I have been lifted by a 98-pound former ballerina completely off the floor because she uses her thighs and her pelvis. This was democratizing. This was revolutionary. Was it gay or straight or black? No. It was one of the best things that came out of the 60s and 70s, that desire for leveling the field and finding new ways. Arnie Zane and Bill T. Jones, yes, we happened to be in love with each other. Arnie Zane was a photographer, a biologist, a biology major and all. But he wanted to be with me. I was a 19-year-old young dancer, and he had already graduated. He lived in Amsterdam, quite sophisticated, had written his thesis, his dissertation on Benjamin West, Death on a Pale Horse, and on Leonardo da Vinci. So he had that, but he also loved me, and he cut my bullshit. He said, okay, you want to dance? Go study dance. We went to Europe. I was studying dance. He was always on me. You don't just do what pretty young black men do, and I used to be pretty. Pretty young black men do. Don't just all the time try to seduce the world, but what do you really have to offer? What is your discipline? This was a dialogue, an infuriating dialogue because of racial dynamics. I did not want to be infantilized by the man I was living with, but he was trying to help me grow up. He encouraged me to be an artist. He came into this art world. The art world was a democratic place at that time wherein people were performing a form that all the roles were being reversed. It was not self-consciously about the social issues. We actually thought the things that people were doing in Alvin Ailey were ridiculous. We thought Martha Graham was ridiculous. We thought that everything that had a theme and a message was ridiculous. Be freedom. Be beauty. Don't talk about it and point about it. All right, now that I've ranted a bit, when I heard years later that Yvonne Rainer, yeah, everybody familiar with her? Very important, Yvonne Rainer, because she made a piece called Trio A that was actually done, movement that she said should have no virtuosity. Nothing in it that would be about seducing an audience. All the stuff that we go to see the theater about, she said no. The dancers were a postman, somebody who maybe was a retired policeman, some people who were dancing, all doing the same gestures, pedestrian gestures. This democratization of the event. Say no to illusion, no to audience manipulation, no to charismatic performers, no, no, no. This was the manifesto of the avant-garde at that time. Now, Yvonne Rainer inspired a lot of us in that way, a way of thinking about what we made, because this was the new art. The new art was not that different from life. So, this great hero of mine, I hear her say, sharing a festival or something with the likes of Elio Pomari and many people who came from Alvin, looking at the work of these black choreographers in the 60s, she said, well, how can they make a revolutionary art using such reactionary means? I was offended. She doesn't understand the struggle, what black people are trying to talk about real things. They're trying to talk about our history. After what I just said, how could I have that response to what she was saying? But this is the classic avant-garde, of which I thought I was a part of, trying to engage in a social discourse. And they didn't have the language. Now, did the people over here, Elio and what have you, did they have the language to engage that avant-garde? I don't know if the two, that's where I came in. I think that's where I came in. I truly tried to stand between the two and locate a black voice and locate a voice. I used to say, because modernism is built on this notion of originality. I mean, where's your place in the art books? I said, well, I don't know if I was original, but I wanted to be authentic. Now, what is authenticity? Everything I'm trying to slosh my way through right now. I love this man. We live together. And yet, I also understand my mother's story about being whipped in front of a white man. The lady last night mentioned my belligerence. Was that belligerence coming from my black experience? Maybe some of it. But I think it also comes from this question we're talking about right now. What is wrong with you people? Why do you want me to do this? Why do you want to make me this? I want to jump ahead where I hope the young folks are now that you're dealing with every day. Did they jump ahead yet? Gloria Steinem, friend of ours, has a lot of young people working with her, and some of them are probably the age of your students, and they said that, now I don't know if these were women or men speaking, they were young women. Amy. We now fall in love with people, we don't fall in love with genders. So that is supposed to be the new people, right? So, are they bullshitting? I hope so. I hope not. Okay. And there was a profound silence. But you know what I'm getting at? I had hoped, or maybe we don't want that. Do we want to jump ahead? Or do I want to preserve the moral authority of being the victim? Do I want to preserve that healthy dose of irateness in my gut that knows that those sons of bitches will not give me a right to marry who I want to, or equal opportunity in the workplace? Well, do I really want to jump ahead? Hopefully, I've decided I have a pathology now. I have racial looking, and I am obsessed with the notion of being oppressed as a gay man. Do I want to give up my oppression? And what does that look like? It looks like me trying not to impose it on the young people around me. And in dance, fortunately, I have a fresh supply of them coming every year. Sometimes infuriating. Aren't you angry about something? Yeah. My understanding was that artists had to have an axe to grind. That's what it was about. Artists had to have an axe to grind. What's your axe? Hey, man, cool down. Just relax. This is a problem you people from the 60s have. Do you get that? I don't know. Anyways, you lost your question, but that's how
I'm happy.
Yeah. This is the murky water, right? Mm-hmm. Clarity. Mm-hmm. There's an artist, Martin Puryear. Do you know him? Mm-hmm. Fantastic black artist. Sculptor. If you saw Martin's work in the gallery, you just think, what an amazing craftsman. And then I had met him, and so he was black, man. And so I'm now looking at his beautiful worked things and the wall pieces, the imagination. I can see the black. There's black in here. I'm looking for it. But why are you straining to find what's black in him? Or for years, there was me and Arnie Zane. Seldom any black folks, because the avant-garde at that time, you could count them on one hand. But then I began to get people coming, oftentimes younger, coming in, young black woman, Andrea Ellen Wood, the first one. And man, she and I used to go at it because I was constantly pushing her buttons, trying to call her a light-skinned, middle-class girl. Look at that language. Light-skinned, middle class, right? Where's the funk? You know, what I was doing to her was done to me. Because I wanted her to be black for me. She said, man, back off, you know? And then I heard myself. But I began this is what it's been like for me to actually own up to the journey, which I have a lot of scars from, and now actually earn all the accolades and what you want me to be. But let's be sure about it. It's been incredibly conflicted. And the only way I can get out of it sometime is to do what I'm doing now. Question, batter back. I want to be able to sing like my mother did on stage. My mother could bring the message. I don't want to give that up. I have some very hip, successful white artist friends, and I say, if you have to be embarrassed about me singing my mother's spirituals, well, you know, we can't be friends. Because this is the heritage that makes me who I am. Black world, progressive black world. Who did they want me to be? Used to be a time, can I bring him in here? Can I bring him with me? A board member actually said that to me, black woman. She said to me, well, you know, I think it's time that you meet the black middle class for my company. Do you travel alone? I said, what do you mean, do you travel alone? I mean, do you go places without him? This is my board member. Well, what do you say? It's going to be easier. If you want to go into those circles right now, you're going to be with us. Yeah, you've got all these awards and all. We want you to come in, but you know, let's simplify it a little bit. Can you hear what I'm saying?
Though I'm not clear if she was talking racially or sexually. Or probably both. But I'm just diffusing that from the racial, which is where you put it.
So if I had a white wife, it would have been easier for me to go in?
If you had had a black wife, it would have been easier.
That's right. That's the easiest route.
Okay, well, I rest my case. You know, yeah. No, but I don't know.
I think
we like Mr. Ailey now, uncut. Excuse the terminology. We like Mr. Ailey. It's best that he not have a sexuality in the way he's used now in the discourse. That is a well-funded company. Ooh. If you are any halfway...
But he was careful not to have a sexuality.
I don't know if he was careful. I just think that he swallowed a lot of bullshit.
I mean, on his stage.
Oh, no, you're talking about on his stage? I'm saying his persona.
On his public persona, not...
Okay. I know that when I was working at the Ailey Company in the early 80s, nobody swishes on my stage or the board. We need men on that stage. And when you're in the Alvin Ailey Company, you're standing for black Americans, and black Americans, there are men and there are women. We don't do that on this stage. You can do whatever you want out there, but when you're on my stage, you act like a man.
And how do you think that's developed
Yeah.
over time? Just because you look at somebody like Catherine Dunham's company, who obviously is an incredible pioneer. When I mention her again, because of her incredible life, and she just died, and she was a graduate of the University of Chicago. She was such a pioneer in thinking about, as a folklorist, thinking about black vernacular movement, its relationship to concert dance and so forth. And by the account of all the older black and indeed many white gay men I've interviewed, the men in that dance company, even compared to most dance companies, were incredibly gay. And I have all these stories of the sort of...
Can I stop you here? Let's get our terminology straight. What makes them incredibly gay?
They were just out and about.
What does that mean?
Well, okay, I'll give you a couple of stories.
No. What I'm getting at, are they effeminate?
Okay.
Do they laugh too loud? Do they use their hands too much?
Well, not on stage, but off stage.
Okay.
Yes, they often did.
So that makes them gay.
It made them recognizably gay.
Right. But you know, let's get real about what we're talking about. We're in the inner circle right now. You know, Bill T. Jones, are you a down brother? A down brother is what? A bit brutish, brash. He certainly does not speak as if he goes to the University of Chicago. He is incredibly studly, chasing every woman in the room. He's not at all cuddly. He could have a sense of humor, but he'll butt you in the head in a moment. That's a down brother. Okay, a gay man is, let's do it. What is that? He dresses well, he's sensitive. Let's talk about it. Come on, what is it? You have this idea of being incredibly gay, but what is it? Oh, come on. What is it?
The word that comes to mind is flamboyant.
Flamboyant. In other words, he shows, in what way? In every way.
Yeah.
He's emotional.
Well, in this context, yeah. A certain an appreciation of style, a certain style of dress and movement, like a kind of effeminacy.
And what's effeminacy? You women in the room, here's, perk your ears up. What's that mean?
It's different from femininity.
Oh, effeminacy. Thank you. Heard it here at the University of Chicago. Effeminacy is different than femininity.
Yeah.
Well, where did we get the ideas from?
From each other, anyway, don't you think?
This is men.
Yeah, I think that it's, well, I mean, what gets mysterious is when people talk about young children and their identifiability and so on, and what happens in that process. But coming out in the gay world, as someone who had learned to control what I was afraid might expose me, but I had no idea what it was,
Yeah.
I can remember having to learn to be effeminate at the right time. I mean, there's sort of shifts in register and vernacular. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of it was about language. I mean, Mary or whatever. I mean, it just had to, you had to learn.
Or what would happen?
Well, I think it was, to me, a lot of this, I mean, and part of the tension that you're talking about is sort of community or being part of a group. So it's the identification with the group. And I think the desire was to be a part of the group. I mean, coming out in the sort of gay liberation period, there was, it was the height of oppression, but it was a great advantage.
Yeah.
Because it gave you a sort of group to identify with, to resist with, to react against what was sort of going on.
And you see, for me, going into it already, not that I was, I remember being with Arnie Zane, who was 5'4".
And who was it?
Who was
effeminate?
He was effeminate. Okay, what can I tell you? He was, and I loved that about him. But he had the kind of, there was something in him that was very macho. As probably, as they say, this whole tops and bottom argument, or drag queens oftentimes quote, drag queens are tops. You know, I hate tops and bottoms, incidentally, but that seems to be a language that the culture, a lot of drag queens are tops. Okay. Arnie Zane would say to me, would be, at that time, it was glitter rock and all that, and he would go to the junk stores and he'd get these padded numbers and all, and I'd say, I don't, he said, if you were a liberated man, you wouldn't care about wearing these things. Oh, if you were liberated. So obviously I'm not liberated, right? Or his friends, the gay lib meetings in the 1970s. 2 stories, a big group of us sitting around, right? And of course, the leader of it, I think he's a Jewish guy, very flamboyant, very smart, and we're going to talk about our oppression. So this one's talking. Incidentally, I'm the only black one there. That's a whole other issue. And then I say, well, where I come from in the black culture, homosexuality has seemed like the ultimate feminization or emasculation of a black man. Silence. Moving on. The party next week is going to be, right? Okay, there I am. I'm a jock. After it's over, who wants to hit on me, right? But not in front of the friends. Now, maybe we're past that now in the gay culture, but at that time, I would go to those meetings on campus, ignored the whole evening, and at the end of the night, who wants to go home with you? So I was getting this kind of mixed message about what it meant to be in the club. Now, was it racial? I'm a farm boy from upstate New York. No, I've never been a swish. Never have. Don't have a problem with it at all. I love my friend for what he was. He could love me. Quite frankly, there was a part of me that only knew women, and there was something that he understood in our lovemaking that allowed he and I to meet. But he also was much more aggressive than I was. After all, he was a white man in the relationship. He could balance a checkbook. I say anything that's incorrect now, right? Yeah? And when we go to get the apartment, he goes first. For a couple of reasons. Number one, they don't rent to black people, and I'm with him. And then the woman said to me, "I'm sorry, we just don't rent to interracial couples." We were flabbergasted when she said that. Wow, that was sort of nice, actually. but the way you do it is he goes first, signs everything, then I show up. You know? We're past that now, right? Don't break my heart, guys. We're talking almost 30 years ago, right?
This is the Midwest. So.
Oh, it's a lag.
I'm sure that in New York, this is.
I guess not necessarily changing gears, but kind of following up on something you said earlier, because when you were talking about, in some ways, the kind of what Ailey represented in terms of a troupe, and then
how he is existing now in
right,
the culture,
and then you seeing yourself as somehow the bridge between that and where there is no where you're not performing in some ways. So, what do you kind of see as you reflect back on this role as the bridge, as some of the joys that you've experienced as a result of that, but also some of the costs? I mean, one of the things that immediately comes to mind, and on some level, Ailey is probably well known, particularly with in black communities and stuff.
I think in terms of name recognition in the country,
right.
Who has a higher in terms of modern dance? You ask people, do they know modern dance? They probably know Alvin Ailey.
Right.
Maybe they know Martha Graham. I don't know. A generation ago they might have.
Yeah.
But now definitely Ailey. You know, if you have the sponsorship of American Express, you know, yeah,
And
don't leave home without it.
Express
Right.
sponsoring.
And let's get it. Alvin was on my board. Alvin was very kind to me. And Alvin, I made a piece for Alvin, 83. I made another piece for him, probably 85 or something like that. Alvin wanted, he came to see my work. The wildest, craziest pieces that we were doing. He said, "You should let us have it. You know, I got better dancers than you do." Because that's a whole other issue. And you know what? Depending on the value, that was true in a way, because if your value is that better dancers mean with more traditional ballet technique and more glamour and the extensions that we talked about last night, yeah, he did have them. And right now he has some of the best in the country. What was the avant-garde doing? The values of the avant-garde were saying no to glamour, no to the legs extended. Then what are you okay, then who are you, young man? You know, what do you do? You know, I used to always say the secret to, I didn't mean to do it today. I took it off because I was ashamed of that shirt and it was too hot. But I used to say that the trick is to know when to take your shirt off. You know? And when I was in Binghamton, New York, before we left, and the mayor's wife came to the performance, because her son, actually, was in the performance, who was coming out. And I didn't know that until later. But she came, and after I'd done, she said, "There's nothing I like so well as a white woman as a sweaty black body." That was her appreciation. You know, okay. She was honest, you know? She was honest. And believe me, there were times when you used to go to Alvin Ailey in the 80s, talk about the lineup. You know how they said the Paris Opera around 1908, when there were no men in the company, and all the young dandies would come with binoculars to decide which one was going to be his mistress, right? And they'd all be at the stage door with flowers, and they'll take you, and you know, because you don't marry a dancer, you know, they're just a little more than prostitutes. Well, okay, that may be later. Initially, dancers and actresses were like prostitutes. We're talking 1908. That's why when Nijinsky leaped on the stage in the Spectre of the Rose, women fainted in the audience because they hadn't seen such virility in since the last 60 years or so. I lose myself. Ailey was that way around the men. You know, some German industrialists, some you know, the Frenchmen, they're all in these beautiful guys, you know, the men lined up at the door, you know. So there was a lot of stuff going on. Hyper masculinity on stage, but then off stage there is something that comes with being Well, and okay, where are you at? So I can also do that kind of seducing thing, you know, the glamour thing, which made me very suspect by the art world that was thinking counterculture, drawstring pants, whole wheat bread, all of that stuff. We don't do glamour. We don't do seduction in the serious art world. But you know, what is a black performer? Now let's talk about that. What is a black performer? Black performer, what is it about Louis Armstrong? That beautiful face. Smiling, laughing, life is wonderful, you know, everything is allowed. I love you, baby. Able to say baby to a man. That's another thing, when you're really macho, you know, you can say baby to a man. What is a black performer? It's something that oozes out of you, you know. I think in a way, hip-hop guys, I love them, particularly now since they start taking off their shirts. When they start taking off their pants, I'd really be interested. But no, what do I mean by that? That's not as prurient as it sounds. Because, you know, I'm a connoisseur of male beauty. But I think when all these muscles that we're showing now is about, I find, kind of, unless this, maybe some of the ladies can speak to me of this, I think it's talk about power, talk about intimidation. These are not soft muscles about, I want to hold you gently. That's what we're showing, preening, right? That's what I mean. Now, when we get to the point where we see the whole body in a vulnerable way, I don't mean to see your ass and your dick, really, but that you can show me your whole body and move easily, because there are parts of the body that you know. Women know it very well, right? Men are fixated. Heterosexual world, actually everybody's invested in women's bodies, quite frankly. The breast, all the erogenous zones, all those places. The whole woman's body is fetishized, quite frankly. Her mouth, her nose, even there are guys that when the nose turns them on. Everything, the breast, the neck, you know, all of that. On men, what is eroticized? Now, what is eroticized?
I think everything is eroticized now, and
Do you
depending
think
on
so?
what. Yeah, I remember your nieces having those pin-up men calendars. Them in the waves with the ass out or with the nice breast, chest out or something like that. You know, so I think.
No, I don't think so.
I think
in the hip hop culture right now, man has
Are you talking hip hop or are you talking in what is eroticized in male?
Right now, black men are most visible as sexual objects in the culture through hip hop
And sport.
and sports. What parts of their body are we allowed, is he allowed to actually show as sensual inviting?
But you know, I think it's also true in sort of white gay gym culture. It's all about building the upper body.
Upper body,
And
yeah.
skinny legs.
And skinny
Not
legs.
worked at all, but very built up.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. But anyways, back to this question of the avant-garde and the black nationalist choreographers. Where did a black man fit in there? And who do you have to be? What language would you have to speak? Physically, how does your body how does your body bear witness in the discourse? These were all the questions that were confusing to me. Yeah.
Can I, from what you said last night, it struck me that where you are now with respect to defining something that is black is at a place where black is associated with a spiritual and religious tradition, even, or as those traditions some may see going back to Africa. And I wanted to know whether there is a kind of, is there any room for something like, that's secular, black, non-spiritual, and black?
Maybe you could tell me. Well, what is it now?
Well, that's a good question.
Good soldiers? Military?
Well, I mean, in terms of expressive culture, the late novelist Leon Forrest once spoke about his admiration for Billie Holiday, in part saying that she was one of the first major performers whose voice did not come out of the tradition of the black church. That is to say, he saw her voice as being sort of distinctively black, coming out of an urban, sort of a new urban tradition that did not sort of cut its teeth within the black church.
Yeah.
And that there might be some way, and he saw his writing as an attempt to, I mean, on the one hand, to grasp that idiom, although he was also invested in a religious spiritual tradition on the other side, but he saw that there were two strains, and wanted to insist that there were at least two strains, one of them, sort of recognizably black, but secular, not out of the church tradition at all. And
Okay, well, I'm just trying to understand what the secular traditions would be. For instance, Billie Holiday, as I understand it, said that she wanted to have the feeling of, she wanted to have the sound of Pops's horn, Louis Armstrong's horn,
right.
and Bessie's feeling.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I understand what she thought she was doing. Both secular, both musicians, right?
Right.
Now, I'm trying to think now, if we're talking about what other traditions would it be? Not the preacher in the church, although as I was trying to say last night, people did not understand in Uncle Tom's Cabin why religion was so important in it. With politics, I said, quite frankly, the church has been a political tool in the black community. The great stars were the preachers. Okay, I'm open. Where are the other great icons? We're talking Booker T. Washington?
No.
Who else
Philip
is?
Randolph.
Organizers.
Yeah, labor organizers.
Labor
Right.
organizers?
Randolph.
Do they loom large in the popular imagination?
I think in their
Sports.
day they did. Not in the memory so much, but in their day, definitely.
Yeah.
Randolph.
Sports nowadays.
Sports.
Nowadays.
Sports. Yeah, okay. Don't you think sports has a lead edge on them
Yeah,
right now?
Well, and labor organizers, yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
And then the opera of the world.
opera?
Oprah Winfrey.
Oh, we're talking men now. Men.
But opera's a good one
Well,
too.
we're talking about men. I didn't realize we.
I thought we were. No.
Black?
Oh, you were saying. Oh, you in general. You weren't saying men. You were saying.
Black's like a
Oh.
tradition.
Entertainment figures.
Now all the music figures, the whole entertainment industry is led to a large extent by black figures. The sports industry is led to a large extent by black figures. The role models, and there is, I think, a growing presence in the business community of this country.
You mean
from
Dick Carsons and such?
Carsons of the world, the Vernon Jordan of the world.
Yeah, but in my mind, they are men cast in. This is, I don't mean to be demeaning to them. They're cast in the role of white businessmen. We're saying where have blacks led traditionally, so that they are the icons that actually we aspire to.
But what traditionally are you talking? Historically, in the past.
Historically, yeah.
Well, in the past, it was closed.
I'm sorry.
Everything was closed, but for certain.
Well, that's what we're talking about.
So
that's what
they
we're talking
couldn't
about.
lead but in those spaces which
Whatever,
were open.
whatever.
But nowadays,
Remember they said there were no
Jewish.
Jewish athletes? We know that's a lie, but that was the perception that there were no Jewish athletes, right?
But nowadays, if we're talking nowadays, the leadership allowed blacks has changed in this culture.
But I think
In
the
the
gentleman's
West.
question, what's your name, sir?
Ken.
Okay, it was a very particular, which you had to do with, he said that I have redefined what I think the black participation is in the art world, and I focus on that which is a spiritual, and then you were saying, what about more secular ones? And that's what we're looking for right now.
Right. Or whether or not, I mean, because I guess another way of thinking about it, perhaps provocatively, would be to say that if it is true that that for an aesthetic to be recognizably black to most people, it has to say invoke aspects of a spiritual church tradition that, as well, whether or not we're secularizing as a culture, man, I would sort of hope that we are. One of the things that becomes imperiled would be sort of the ongoing production of the recognizably black. That is to say, if it is the case that these traditions become less and less important, are we moving necessarily to a place where the markers by which we distinguish cultural performance, contributions, and the like become less certain with respect to what counts, what counts racially, and I guess one result being what might be put in peril generally is whether or not you can have a kind of recognizably, whether you can have, whether you would want or desire to continue to reproduce something that's a recognizably racial kind of art, performance, or expression?
Well, see, for me, it's not that I've done it for the brand name recognition, but I have had to, in shaking down through all the murk that I opened this conversation with, what do I really believe in? What do I love? It's those things, actually, from Black culture, which a lot comes through my mother. And those things, that's why I put them forward now in terms of looking for authenticity. Who are you? I used to think you could reinvent yourself. I don't think it's so easy to reinvent yourself. Why are you? And those things, I accept that. Now, the fact is that I am a Eurocentrist as well. I'm crazy about Beethoven. When I think of artist, the idea of an artist, I think of Paris between the wars. Gertrude Stein, Alasdair Toklas, that whole milieu, the avant-garde, John Cage, heroes of mine, those people. So I have lots of heroes, but they come from very particular places and not always politically correct places in terms of what we're talking about. So what you're getting from me right now, that's why I have to be very careful when I'm in a forum and they want me to talk about my work as Black work or gay work. It is really trying to really blend and be honest about what has made me. I am an American artist. Now let's talk about what it means to be an American artist. You know,
it's interesting because recently I was reading a novel, the Jinping Mei, 17th century
17th.
Chinese novel that has been much censored and is even the Chinese authorities do not acknowledge it as a masterpiece because of its candid talking of fairly extreme sexual practices by its lead protagonist, practiced by its lead protagonist. And so I was reading it, and since I'm past the age when I would read such novels purely for their prurient facets, I read the whole of it. And it was, and it is a great novel, and particularly, of course, I'm sure we lose a lot in translation. I was reading it in French, which I am, and
I read the English translation, which didn't wasn't as interesting.
They weren't so good with the food descriptions, and interestingly enough, but what was very interesting was that actually, percentually, I didn't do the statistic, but percentually, the part of sex is in the novel is probably true to the percentage that sex represents in the consciousness of a man, a young man. So it describes a life and the pursuit of business, of relation, of ascension, of love, of prurient love, of sexual practice, probably in a manner that, okay, he may be, because of his means and access to certain things, more able to practice it than others, and the lack of moral constraint in a society.
Are you saying there's a lot, or there's a little?
But I'm saying there is a lot of it, but there isn't. But it's not what the novel is about. The novel is about a character, and it candidly discusses what probably a 20-some, early 30-year-old man of means and leisure will do unless he is an artist with another elevated.
I'm trying to see where you're going with this. What is this?
So, I am trying to think that in your work, or in your work, the presence of homosexual themes, the presence of Arnie dies, your grief for Arnie, and expressing grief, not necessarily grief as seen as gay, though it happened to be triggered by a gay relation, but grief.
It was hard to get it there. I would like to have had it seen as grief, but because
people, that's exactly what my point is, that people attach themselves, just like
it became
in that
about
novel.
AIDS work.
That is what pops out in the consciousness, just like and I'm taking the example of the Chinese novel in order to remove it once from the personal. I think that the media, the attention goes to those buttons which are titillating or headline making because of the society more than because of the artist.
But Bjorn, I have to,
himself.
and I agree with you, and that's what you've heard. I fight, but then I think, what was this thing about identity politics that happened somewhere around the mid-80s through maybe the mid-90s? You know what I'm getting at? The culture wars about the identity politics, where they would say, well, the woman that gave me this terrible critique in the New Yorker that out in Croce was saying, you know, as a critic, I am beleaguered these days, because how can I criticize work? How can I criticize people I feel sorry for? And she said, oh, what did she say? Disenfranchised blacks, abused women, fat people, dying people.
Something derogatory about homosexuality.
Well, not, she didn't mean to. She said, I just, well, it defeats my ability as a critic because I feel so sorry for them. This is unfair. This is victim art. This is, you know what I'm getting at? That was this article that, in ways, maybe from my point of view, defined what the issues were.
And you know,
so for us to back off and say,
but you know, on a certain level, I agree with her if the work is bad, and I disagree with her if the work is good. That means that a work that is just somebody who's gay and who's making a work about being gay, but it's a bad work. Or,
well, let's make a work about a brutalized
gay
woman.
Is not, no, exactly. Or gay is not being a victim. Being gay, I don't think we look at it anymore as being a victim. But somebody who is has something that causes one to feel sorry for that person. That person is capable to transcend that. Frida Kahlo, okay? Total physical suffering, transcends her physical suffering. We don't look at her work as being the work of a victim, though we can look at the specificities of her, what generated those work, and see somebody who is in deep suffering and who one would tend to feel sorry for purely on a physical level of what she had to go through physically. And yet her work is not looked as a victim person's work. So I think it has to do with the quality of the work more. And in the case of that article, it was regrettable for applying an idea that there is an abundance of work that is being done of mediocre quality, of all streaks and of all kinds.
Well, she was ignoring that.
And she was, it's not a justified work that comes from a place of suffering. The place of suffering doesn't make the work acceptable by necessity, and some of that work you feel, indeed, you can't criticize it because it is.
And the other part of it,
but the other part is the quality.
Oh, okay, yes, quality, but quality is also in the eyes of the beholder. And that's when the can of worms opened. How do I, as let's say middle-aged, heterosexual woman, critique the work of a 23-year-old homosexual woman or man, and in that work, and if they try to use the language of their generation, the music, the whatever, am I really that versed to be able to categorize, to analyze it on its terms? That was one of the things in the culture wars that was going on. What was the language of critical discourse being used, and who was wielding that language? That was also a problem. You could say, was it a good work or not? Well, depends on who's looking at. I mean, this is what you guys are talking about, right? New cultural and critical paradigms.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
can
is
we criticize-
there a gay sensibility? Does it exist? And do you have to be an initiate to really understand?
Can we apply formal criteria to criticizing an African sculpture that is meant as an object of worship and not as a work of art?
We can and we do.
And so, in that sense, and yet we know we cannot place ourselves in the place of the creator of that work. So how is that different from a straight person criticizing a work that is an insider work of a gay person or expressing of an, you know what I'm trying to say? I think we can apply, and it's a challenge, and I think it is an ever evolving one, but I think it is one that is not, it's not that a straight person can't criticize a gay person's theme, or the work that deals with gay issue, or just like a European art critic can criticize, and in both cases there are aspects that will be missed, of course. But I go to the Met as a white, Jewish, homosexual, Israelo-French man living in this country. I go to the Met and look at Dan mask from Africa, and I feel something purely on an aesthetic level, and I miss out everything that Dan tribe sculptor was expressing on the religious, you know, so.
No, I understand. I just want to make sure that when people look at the work, they are humble enough to realize that maybe, I've heard women say to me, I've been on panels, and we're looking at work, and there will be a woman's work that I just like, and they'll say, look, it's a woman thing, you know, and, you know, yeah, okay, maybe. It's not for me. I don't get it. I don't know. Now, can I look at it formally? Can I look at it? I have my criteria, and that's valid. But then there's another level at which I have to show some sort of deference. And I think in Arlene Croce, and I think in the Culture Wars, that deference was not necessarily there.
Make sure other people in the group who have questions have time to ask.
So you women haven't talked very much today.
You talked about actually being trained in cinema, and I wondered, besides Sailboat, how that may have affected your, and Sailboat was really important, but how it affected your choreography. And certainly we see it in some of the multimedia presentations, but are you thinking cinematically at times?
Literally, the notion of accumulation and deaccumulation, as Audrey Zane and I explored them, were filmic techniques. As film being 24 frames, still pictures moving by. So a lot of the work was gestural and still pictures that would, over time, speed up or slow down or be reorganized. They were almost, the gestures had to be burned into the audience's mind through repetition and then reordered to either make what was still move or what have you. That's one way in which it was done. I think the voiceover is something that I like to use a lot in choreography. Something abstract happening, but then you hear something else being said. I've even done it in the body, saying one story, and then trying to move in another way. So the audience has to like put together the experience, watching and listening at the same time. And I think we could say that was filmic as well. Yeah. But I'm really serious. I'm not going to let I know this is supposed to be like gender and all that, right? It's been dominated by a group of men, homosexual men, sitting around. Well, why do you?
What do you think?
Yeah, well, why?
I'm kidding. Usually they can't get a word in.
Yeah, but what is it? What can you get out of this? What do you want out of this? And who are you?
Blasé. I did have a question about the effeminacy, effeminate thing.
Which is the first time I've ever heard that.
The difference between the two?
Yeah.
Oh, really? Oh, that's fascinating, because I think that seems like clear to me too, that they're in relation to one another, but they're distinct. And the reason I think one of the questions one asks about, you know, the issue of effeminacy and dance is that you were asking us what constitutes effeminacy, and part of what we kept circulating back to is a certain kind of movement of the body. Right? So that there's a way in which certain kinds of movements of the body that one might call graceful in a certain kind of way,
delicate,
right?
delicate, or
And delicate, particular, then converge with understandings of dance as well, right? So it's not like there isn't a macho kind of dance. I realize that, but that there's something about the convergence of those two things that, you know, it's an obvious thing to say.
It was the most difficult thing when I was on Ronnie Gross. You know Ronnie Gross, the NPR commentator,
Yeah.
And she was asking.
I heard that interview.
Yes, and she was asking me, well, could you describe a feminine movement? Describe a masculine movement. Traditionally, men are given the leaps. Women are given the petit allegro. Women are allowed filigree and decoration. Men are supposed to be stolid. I'm going always to classical ballet, of course. Stolid, who do very simple, very little things, but big, but spectacular things. And then they stand. Yeah, right. Well, of course, the princes, Albrecht, that's a very particular role. How a man takes you to the perfumed precincts of the 19th century Romanticism, and the prince, who is chasing a phantom, who is a bird or an idea, right? And he's not a working man, so he always stands a little bit more plastique and all. And you can judge them by, they can't go too far, but they got to have something soft about them, Byronic, is that the word you'd call it? The poet about them. So the ballet world has been playing with this. Modern dance was supposed to have moved that away. Paul Taylor, in being interviewed about Martha Graham, said Martha Graham used men as dildos. She was the strongest person in the room always, but she had this dilemma that straight women have, is that she needed that thing, that she needed that, and she had also conflicting feelings about it. This feeling, and the Phaedra, right? She has this Noguchi, this weird, horrible shaped knife, right? And Phaedra, of course, is in love with her young nephew, her stepson, Hippolytus. So the piece begins like this. Behind her, you see two beautiful guys in gold lame, after Halston, of course, gold lame jockstraps, doing Greco-Roman wrestling, right? While she's torn because she wants the boy. So what she does is that there's this movement, classic Graham, where that she takes the knife and she's into her vagina like this, right? And while he and the other guy, they are the objects, but they've got to be like that kind of object. She told David Brown, who Lisa Monte's ex-husband, when he danced with her, she said, "You've got to be a man in my company." And he was not prepared for the role, he said, and she said, "Tonight, if you can't dance this role tonight, you can't dance for me." So at once she was the mother, excuse the language, at once she was the dick, but it had a vagina. And everything was organized around it. In fact, she was not a gay woman. She was a heterosexual woman. So how then did men work in that world? So she was a very problematic and important study.
But that makes me think, and something that I've been wondering over the course of the two conversations, is that it seems to me that part of what the avant-garde expansion of dance vocabulary in the 70s did was reveal how unbelievably gendered and heterosexual dance was. That it was actually something that was so naturalized that it took the abstraction of it to make its embodiedness clear. So that once you came around on the other side of that abstraction, you immediately entered into questions about sexuality and gender because of the history of the form. So that, in fact, it may not have started out as a critique of gender, may not have been, or sexuality, but it backed into it, because once you started lifting anybody by anybody, it started to look queer. And so it wasn't neutral to do that. Actually, bodies aren't abstract, or they weren't.
Now you're sounding like Merce now.
But they aren't received in that way. So that all of a sudden, this.
Well, now who's looking?
Well, but
who's looking?
I'm talking about Joe, or Josephine ballet subscriber who's coming in and like,
So you're saying that Merce Cunningham is correct when we, my generation, would say to him, Merce, if you use chance procedures as to who can dance with who, why do we never see two men dancing together? Okay, that was said, and now I think he may have changed, but that was only recently. He said because it was drawing too much attention to itself. When we did that, it was suddenly threw off the balance of the stage.
So that all it meant was chances and chance, right?
I thought that he had a problem.
Yeah.
And I thought that you could let the audience, I'm not sure right now, if you see what young folks do right now, I don't think you necessarily think that this is about coupling. when people handle
But
each
it took,
other.
I think it took a lot of viewing to uncouple the idea of the couple from the dyad. That you had to have a real education in dance, and you had to see a lot of different movement and kinds of movement.
And good movement.
And good movement to break out of the impulse to understand it as an erotic couple. I mean, that was so deeply, and because, I mean, what you were saying about Graham made it so much click even more, because the balancing, that's not a surprise, you know, oh, duh. But to think of Graham as also organizing, even in a more abstract mode, a deeply heterosexual, deeply gendered pattern that, you know, that it took 30 years, maybe not 30 years, but it took, certainly through the AIDS period, it took a very long time to, and there were many people who wanted during that period to use the energy of the erotic couple in order to make a political statement, in order to make visible, you know, blah, 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 you know.
When I did
but so that it actually then, it was then there was a real purpose to maintaining the eroticism of the couple. So I mean, I think there's just always this tension that comes in and out, and abstraction does not do away with that. It made it visible in the form.
Well, we did last year Reading Mercy and the Artificial Nigger, which is actually staging a Flannery O'Connor story. And I said that we were going to take the ethos of my company, representing diversity on all sorts of levels, and put it into the ethos of the 1950s in the Deep South. Or was it the other way around? Taking the Deep South and putting it into my company. But the way we did it was we did gender blind casting. Gender and racial blind casting. In this piece, it's talking primarily about race, but not only. It was, I think that the audience was able to, maybe it was because of the story. The story was an old man and a little boy.
But there was a text.
There was a text.
It was
that
down
helped.
to
You
the
were reading the
reading
story
of
as
the
well?
reading
Yeah,
of the
yeah,
story.
yeah,
was.
yeah. And that really, I think it vindicated something for me, that now we can use this new world now to do whatever we want it to do. My problem is that sometimes it's hard to, when I want to talk about a world, that I can actually show a credible, quote, heterosexual situation. You know, and that's a very important trope, a very meaningful trope when you're trying to communicate with masses of people. They're patient and tolerant, and they see our same-sex partnering and what have you, or they get the buddy or the abstraction. You can be abstract with man and woman, yeah, but it's really hard to, now we're going to do a believable and credible heterosexual coupling. I think I get impatient with it. I think I don't have enough patience with it. I think it always looks too familiar.
Right, right.
Yeah, and I think that's my own problem.
And to be original in that form may be virtually impossible.
Yeah.
Tracy?
Can I ask you to go back to the story you started telling about going to meet the black middle class?
Whatever happened to it?
And, you
You know?
just the question of audience and,
She never
the black
delivered on
audience.
that.
Oh.
She never
I
delivered
volunteered
on
to
it.
step back.
Yeah, he was all right with it. He said if as a board member she needed to do that.
If it can bring money to the company, me
Yeah.
not showing up.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
really?
want to
Can I go
know.
to that, a fundraiser?
Yeah, I want to know where those persons hang out. I want to go and be part of that group. And we never got there.
She's a historian.
Okay. All right, that's another discussion, right? I'm sure that's another discussion.
If you're going to deconstruct everything, we're going to deconstruct.
Right. I thought, oh my God, she's Spanish. But we're always working.
What is effeminacy?
What is a mixed audience?
But I think that Ailey's audience, for instance, is much more an audience of people of color than our audience because of that very thing that Bill is talking about. And I do think that, in fairness also, people go to see what they relate to. I mean, if you're going to have a gay-themed film, it will have a predominantly gay audience. If you are going to have Ron Brown performing beautiful Afro-Caribbean inflected modern dance to music
With a primarily black cast.
with a primarily black cast, his constituency and audience is going to be just that.
But I'm not sure about Ailey's audience. I think Ailey has a lot of black people in it, but it's a very mixed audience.
But it's way more mixed.
and probably more white than black. Because that has to do with
Because-
class and who buys
and
tickets.
Who buys tickets? Of course, of course.
You know?
But they have much higher, a much bigger percentage of people than our audience have.
Granted. Yeah.
It is something. I mean, the revelation, is going to draw. It's iconic. It's also its place in the social development movement of the land.
Your question is a good one because you're talking about the future. Our home that we hope to have in the next 3 years will be right next door to the Apollo Theater. Right? If everything works right, it will be.
It seems to
Now, how do we get that community to embrace us as who we are? And everything we've talked about today. This remains to be seen. What do I have to do so people relax and say this is a place for me? Well-meaning people, there'll be that small group of middle-class people who they don't really care, they want to go see the work or what have you, but other people want to know questions, what is black dance? Is it going to talk to me about slavery? Is it going to talk to me about, the things that traditionally associate with that experience? Or do they go see an art form that has been able to, led by a black man, that's been able to make that jump that we all once believed was supposed to be happening? Now that's what I know we're out of time now, but did we once believe that there was going to come a time when a lot of the things we're talking about now would be unimportant to talk about?
And the problem with that is the people who say that all the time now are people like the former chancellor at the UC schools about anti-affirmative action. It's a sort of conservative.
Yeah, they've taken that language.
Conservatism. They've taken that language. It's part of.
What is that?
Well, and a lot of people who complain about identity politics forget that the reason the identity became important was because the state and the whole society disqualified you because of that identity. They gave it to you, and then you used that as a form of disqualification. There's a reason people organize around this and claim this identity.
Well, that's what the company wants to still stand for, with all the conflicts that I've exposed yesterday and today. But it wants to stand for a place where there's possibility and that it's truly mixed. Is that a mirage that I have? This home is going to call me on it. Will people come? Not me saying that I'm super black man, because I'm not. Will they come and see what the project is? Can they make the jump?
And as we will have teaching happening, and not just professional, but my guess would be that yes, Harlemites will bring their kids.
The children to be educated.
But will they then buy tickets to go and see us at Lincoln Center? And does the one translate into the other? And can one expect it to?
Well, that's a question. Who buys tickets to modern dance? Who are they? On Broadway, right now, they say on Broadway it is the aging, blue-haired Jewish population that buys the bulk of the tickets on Broadway. Symphony orchestra, all that. The big push right now is getting young people into all of those venerable institutions. And what is your hit show on Broadway? What's going to bring... 45 is considered young on Broadway. 45, I was told that.
But
That's
also,
young.
look, ticket price have a lot to do with it.
Okay, for whatever reason, who can afford to support the institutions? Who goes to culture? Is it racial or is it in terms of economics? What is the black middle class doing with their money? What are they doing? They scare me. I think they're incredibly conservative.
And what's happening to Harlem as...
Oh, Harlem is the Wild West.
Less black.
Yeah, they say that's what Thelma Golden, the director of the Studio Museum of Harlem. Have you had her out here at all?
She was here a few years ago.
What, on your campus?
Not here, she was at
The-
Columbia College.
And at the Museum of Contemporary Art. She did.
Well, you should get Thelma up here to talk about Harlem because she feels that Harlem is like all of New York. It's all about real estate and opportunity. And there is a disconnect between the people who are buying the $500,000 condos.
$500,000, three-quarter.
Yeah, okay, but are they shopping in the neighborhood? Right? Do they get in their cars and go downtown to have dinner?
Yeah, but 125th Street is completely transformed.
It's transforming.
There's a lot of street commercial retail places that
Mhm.
were
It's the
10
number
years ago,
one grossing
Oh, that-
Old Navy store, or
Is that
Old
right?
Navy or
Mhm.
Gap, one of those
Yeah.
from the chain.
We have faith as well. It's not quite the cosmopolitan pocket that we, with our marginalized art form, need.
Right.
The cafes, the whole
Right.
kind of mix of fashion and commerce that is downtown. You know, walk in Chelsea.
But it's
You
the
know,
performing arts in general that are having a declining audience base.
or
right?
a flat artist
Right.
base, maybe that's what it is. And so people are trying different things. Where are the young people spending their money?
Right.
Do you know the Gorillas, by any chance? That new group, the Gorillas?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All animation. I think Madonna actually danced with one of them on the. Was it?
If you don't see
Yeah.
them, I just
They did.
Right.
They're all
On the blue
British.
screen, yeah.
All British. Smart young guys, and they did their show in New York at the Apollo.
Ah.
Dennis Hopper was the first person who appeared. Ike Turner on stage. Whatever. Very smart, these guys. But you never see the real performers. They're all cartoons. You know, these kind of low-lifer, decadent types. Well, it depends on who you talk to. Daniel told me,
a
he's...
music director who is a Harlemite and black.
Well, actually, Julian Schnabel was there. And Julian said that he felt that the room was 85% white. In Harlem, mind you. Because that's that kind of young, hip crowd. But those guys, why did they decide to do it in Harlem? It gives them a kind of cachet.
Yeah.
You know, are they getting the people from the street in there to listen to this and dig on the internet and artificial intelligence and all that? And that the same questions for us. What do we hope? I would love it to be a place where people, feel they can come in and out and they own it.
So is it going to change the kind of work you do you think, to try to cultivate that audience?
Stay tuned. Change the type of work I do. As I said, when I stopped doing Still Here and Uncle Tom's Cabin, and people, what happened to your politics? I said, my politics are like my face. It's not, you can't change it. You can just tell what I love and how I'm going to behave. I do the whole educational component. The more we become an institution, there's a lot of people who people meet before they meet me. And we have consultants in Harlem. We have meetings with the Chamber of Commerce. All that stuff, what I'm doing right now is pretty late. You don't usually get that. There's a lot of workings, state government, what grants are you getting, all these, that sort of stuff happens. What is the work? That's another idea. I did a piece a few years ago called The Table Project. I had an idea that I wanted to make a piece that I was sitting in it with him in a bar, not in a bar, in a cafe, breakfast place in Berkeley, and I saw a row of guys of a certain age, they're probably all my age, big guys, coming out of their clothes, sitting there like this, talking to each other, and I thought
on the stools,
on the stools as we sat back here from the back watching them, with their buddies, talking like this. I'm assuming they were probably heterosexual guys, truck driver types. And I thought, these guys are never looked at. These are the lookers in the society, I said. And I thought about my work. I am on stage, I show, I display, that's what we do. So I thought, why don't I raise the ante and do a work in which I would invite, quote, real guys. But I wanted not only real guys, I wanted prominent ones who had a lot to lose. So I got successful men to bring, my board members, to come and learn this simple...
Councilman Bill Perkins.
Yeah, Councilman Bill Perkins, Eric
In New York.
Anderson, who is head of the developer, who's on the board now. That sort of guys. In Boston, we actually had a former
runner for governor.
former government candidate and all. And their wives in the audience, their kids in the audience. It was great. They were game. And because the culture looks at they're a joke. You see a guy with a stomach like that on stage. Immediately following them, I said, if I look at the great, I say, if those men are here, I don't think their opposite are women. I think their opposite are prepubescent girls.
Yeah.
So have them do the same movement to a beautiful piece of music. It was actually a Schubert piano trio, ritualistic. Bjorn made a beautiful decor. Sometimes it looked like they're they're playing games and all. You know, they had to learn the simple thing, but then little girls come out and do the same thing. So whereas a guy would do this, suddenly you have a little girl who can turn herself into a complete circle, like a, you know. So the guys were good sports. The audience loved them. They went, oh, little girls, you know, like that. And once again, as I said last night, that piece was about watching yourself watch. What clinched up with the men, shaking hands, what have you. What freed itself with the little girls. We expect little girls to do this or hold hands. I don't know what, there's something about that's the kind of work that was actually done in Harlem at the Aaron Davis Hall. That work, because I had to go to the local school there, it brought all of that onto the stage. We need more works like that that are going to let the community in and really see themselves. We step back. I'd like to stop. I think we should, right? People look like you all have to go somewhere.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.